Greetings, friends. So some of the ethical vegans, the ones who push vegan as a moral philosophy and an imperative to not eat meat, to make the world a better place, to do the right thing, in their argumentation they often employ name the trait, where they ask you to name the trait which differentiates humans from the animal world. The assumption is that you can't, and therefore humans are animals, and therefore we shouldn't eat animals because that would be like eating one of our own fellow beings. So they seek to make unclear the distinction between humans and animals, which should be obvious to all of us. They acknowledge that there's something special about humans in that they are trying to convince us to change our behavior to make the world a better place. That by humans doing this, there's something special about humans, that we could stop eating meat and really put the world in a much better place. They know that there's something special about humans. We all know that there's something special about humans, and yet they ask this question, name the trait. Now, you can entertain the question. It's not an unfair question, but I think it is asked a bit dishonest. I think it is asked a bit dishonestly. But we can actually answer it, because the Christian answer is that humans are made in the image of God, animals are not. Now, doubtless the vegans have heard this many times. They are not satisfied with this answer. They say, well, what's the actual trait? What's the actual trait? I mean, we're not materialists. Many of the vegans are not materialists either. Some of them are. So it's not like a trait has to be some physical thing that you can see, that therefore that's the human thing that an animal doesn't have. Of course, there are many physical markers of humans, but because you can't pinpoint just one, and because there's overlap between what humans have and the animal world has, they use that as sufficient reason to say, well, therefore the distinction is murky and humans are just animals. It's bad reasoning, but that's what they do. Now, there are ways, however, to answer the question of name the trait by pointing out some traits that do not exist in any animals. Now, the first one would be, well, I mentioned made in the image of God. This would basically be unpacking that question. What does it mean to be made in the image of God? What are the actual things, if we could call them things, or aspects of being made in the image of God, which humans have, which differentiate us entirely from the animal world? This is including language. Humans have language uniquely. There is no other creature that has language. Some animals have communication. All animals have some form of communication. But communication is not language. It's not the same thing. Language is not merely a sum total of more communication. It's on orders of magnitude and complexity. So the sum that is more than, it's more than the sum of its parts, is in what I'm trying to say. Human language and language itself involves words and grammar and sentences. So if you can show me any animal that has words and grammar and sentences, then I can be more open-minded that animals might have language. They might have certain sounds, like whales and dolphins might have certain sounds that might mean certain thing, but that's not the same exactly as a word that could be written or could be mass-produced in a certain way that it would always be recognized the same way. Now, there are certain sounds that the animals have that you might liken to a word, kind of, but I would need to see them used in a systematic way in sentences with grammatical rules in order to say that this is a language. Apart from even asking, well, do they have an oral tradition, and can they pass down oral teachings to their offspring? I mean, no, these are just sounds that we're all hardwired with. Even humans can produce certain sounds from birth which communicate certain emotions. We have a natural facial expressions too. That's a form of communication. That's not language. Humans uniquely have morality and the ability to understand moral laws from God, or if you're a materialist, then laws of the physical universe. These kinds of regulatory forces in nature that no animal can understand. You might say animals are amoral. They don't have a moral conscience. Although the way that many animals act, if humans did the same, we would say it's extremely immoral. In fact, up until recently, to say that someone acting like an animal was an insult. It's something derogatory. It's even a horrible thing to say about someone, to call someone a dog or to be acting like an animal, because it puts them on a lower level than what the human is. Yet another trait, appreciation of beauty. No animal can appreciate beauty. You might say they create things which are beautiful. Maybe they get certain enjoyment. Who knows what an animal enjoying something? How could we say what that is? But certainly, maybe a spider likes to spin a web a certain way, and it looks kind of beautiful to us. But that's not the artistic consciousness. That's not architecture. That's not any of the aesthetic sensibility that a human can have, and that can find expression only in civilization, which is uniquely human. No animal can participate in beauty in this sense of actually creating beauty and appreciating beauty in the world. Another trait would be that humans have stewardship of creation and a responsibility to God. This ties in with morality. But we have stewardship over creation because of our unique position. Now, it's tempting to fall into a trap and saying, oh, well, because humans are bipedal, or, oh, well, because we have a certain brain. But no, we're not materialists. We're not going to get caught up in genetics. Many people can get tripped up on this question. It doesn't need to trip you up because it doesn't have a good foundation, as we've seen. But there are simple ways to answer this from the metaphysical element. You don't have to get saying, well, this physical trait of the humans like this or like that, that's why we're humans, because they're always going to use that to just pry open more question marks. Well, what do you mean by that? Well, you can't find that in some other animal kingdom, so don't get lost trying to go into genetics or the brain when you try to pinpoint the human trait, as if there's like the trait. Under the heading of stewardship and responsibility, we have agriculture, husbandry of animals, and related to this would be technology, but these are forms of technology already, animal husbandry and agriculture. No animal does that. You can say certain animals manipulate nature and maybe encourage certain things to grow, but that's not the same thing as selecting seeds, plowing fields, using animals in a relationship with the soil. This is of a higher magnitude. Just like I was explaining with language, is on a higher magnitude of certain sounds, which are basic forms of communication. It's more than the sum of its parts. It's not just a mere aggregate. You might say the human trait is culture itself, but all of these things are expressions of or implied in culture. You might mention just clothing as a trait. It seems trivial, and maybe I'm falling into the trap of pinning it down on one thing, but it is true. There are no animals that wear clothing. There is nothing like that. There may be some animals that might, I don't know, get dirty or something, or have mud on them or whatever for a certain reason maybe, but there's no animal clothing. They don't make anything. The animals barely make anything apart from using certain sticks or rocks. Monkeys or other animals might employ basic, very primitive use of tools. That is true. But there's no deep sense in which animals make anything that doesn't come out of their own bodies. I mean, bees make honey, but again, they're just like taking pollen and passing it through a biological process. They have to do it. They have to be the machine. They can't make a machine. They have to be the machine. Clothing also opens up to the reality that humans can feel shame. This is what clothing is partly about. It's partly, and probably most deeply, about shame. It's not necessarily a practical reason that we always wear what we wear, but there is something about being covered that is essential and has a deep truth that speaks to our role in creation, why we are the ones to cover ourselves. The animals do not do this. The animals know no shame. That's part of the reason why they don't have clothing, because the animals know no shame. Now, they may protest that all of these things are baked into the Christian worldview, but when they're asking name the trait questions, and then you can't, in their worldview, entertain the presuppositions of starting from God and the creation of man, then what we're just supposed to abandon our worldview and accept your presuppositions? They have their own presuppositions. So yes, it is, every worldview is an inclusive package. That's why some of these things circle back in on themselves. There's a reference to God throughout all of these traits. There is your name the trait, okay? So this should settle it once and for all. Language, which is not mere communication that animals may have. Morality, ability to understand the moral law and perhaps physical laws. Appreciation of beauty. Stewardship of creation and responsibility to God. Agriculture, husbandry, clothing, mathematics, philosophy, farming, husbandry, and other technologies. Hasta luego, amigos.